Welcome to the Change Book Podcast. My name is Rachel Best, and this is our co-host.
I'm Nicole Harvick.
And this is the Change Book series. It is the fastest growing self-empowerment book series on the planet.
This spans over 30 countries, and we now bring them all together in a powerful podcast destined to change people from all corners of the globe.
So go ahead and grab your pen and paper because our guest today is going to share a lot of amazing tips and inspiration that you're definitely going to want to write down.
Hi, everyone. I am Nicole Harvick, and I am the host of the Change Book Podcast. We have an amazing guest / co-author today. His name is Ira Wolfe. And he is the founder and co-host, and I love this name, Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. Ira, that's hard to say. And the funniest thing I read today is he is a millennial trapped in a baby boomer body. So I feel so bad for him, but I totally relate to it. Hello, Ira, how are you?
Hey, Nicole, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're here today. I want to hear all about everything you have going on. But let's start with Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. What is that?
So let's start with the Googleization part. And yeah, it is hard to say.
It is. It's a tongue twister.
It was one of those shower moments, one of those things that just pops in your head. I was, and this goes back about 15 years ago. I was writing one of my other books. It was called Geeks, Geezers. I was playing around with the geeks and the geezers. So it was about the 4 generations in the workplace. So now we have 5 generations. We soon may have 6, but
wow.
in hard to believe, but less than 20 years ago, we had 4 generations in the workplace. And, the baby boomers and the next older generation was complaining about all those darn millennials. So if we can remember that time, we got bigger issues these days, but we can go back that time. And the original title was the Wired, the Tired, and Technology. And it was about how there were some people that were connected, some people hated the internet, some people loved the internet, and we were in this fast changing world. But I came across one of my favorite thought leaders is Warren Bennis. People that can go back and maybe our generation, 80s and 90s. He was just a brilliant guy. And he had written the book Geeks and Geezers, and it said, how can we play on that? And I don't know. I was listening to something, heard something, one of those spontaneous serendipitous moments, and somebody talked about azation. I can't remember what it was, but they talked about the Google is. It wasn't Googleization, but like the Chat GPTization of the world.
Yeah.
And it's like Google, what rhymes with geeks and geezers? What was the alliteration? And long way around that. But it came out Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization, which really initially meant the convergence of the wired, the tired, and technology. And then that evolved into what we talk about now, especially on Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization, the podcast. We talk about the convergence of people, business, and technology. And it was somewhat prescient because we're in that world talking about, some people are talking about singularity where, we become one with the machine. I'm not quite there, but.
But, that's very, very true. Because many years ago when I started hearing about, the laptops and the, Googling this and Googling that. And I was just like, I don't think I'll ever use that. And, here we are today and we don't get off of it really, whether it's on our phone, whether it's our laptop. I mean, we're so immersed in this world that can literally encompass the world. I mean, I've talked to people in other countries. I know you have too. And it's really pretty amazing looking back just, how many years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And here we are.
We're in dial-up 20 years ago.
Yeah, I remember them. America Online.
Getting that sound, and waiting forever, going out for a cup of coffee to see if we could connect.
Yeah, we're giving our age away. We better stop that. Oh goodness. So tell me about the book. the Change Book series. What did you write about? What was your chapter about?
Yeah, the title of it's called, and it was tough coming up, but, well, like everything else, what's that catchy title? And it was really going from Blahsville to brilliance. And, we're living in a time, I mean, it's so disruptive. People, we are addicted to, humans are addicted to certainty. They like predictability. Most of us, I mean, some of us like a lot of change, but that's what we're writing about. But most people don't really, are fearful of change, or if they're okay with change, it happens too quickly. And, on any given day these days, going back to Warren Bennis, we talk about a VUCA. I don't know, for those who aren't familiar with it, it was an acronym he came up with in the 1980s to describe the world we would be living in, similar to like Alvin Toffler talked about, future shock. And what it was is that things would just be moving so fast that it would completely stress us out. But he wrote it from a leadership perspective. So what VUCA was he talked about the world being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I've been talking about that writing about it for 20 or so years. But it was more out there, it's like, hey, we're going to have this world that's going to be so volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And then the pandemic hit.
Whew.
And it's like, okay, pandemic equals VUCA. It's like volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And each of those, we could spend the whole episode on each one of those, how volatile the world is, uncertain and complex and ambiguous. Anyway, long story short, everybody was going to go back to normal, within 2 weeks, within a month, within 2 months. When the vaccine came out, we were just going to go back to normal. We would just slide back, and everybody wanted that routine. And I actually started a newsletter called Never Normal.
Ooh, I like that.
And because we had, going back to normal, the new normal, the next normal, everybody had these terms. And I think for me, the one that described it the best was, it was never going to be normal in the sense of the way it used to be. Normal was going to be always never normal. It was going to be always VUCA. Okay. So a lot of people are struggling with it. Uncertainty went out the window, and people don't know how to deal with it. I mean, we were wired for years and years and years of that predictability, including where we went to work. We basically, most people graduated high school, and many more went to college, and then you applied for jobs, and then you had careers, and that's what you did for the next 30 or 40 or 50 years. And then, that was life. And that doesn't even exist. I mean, nothing that we imagine could be there. As a millennial trapped in the baby boomer body, I could be like all my peers and all my colleagues and say, talk about the good old days. And yet I'm looking at the possibilities, the challenge, what the future could look like, and new opportunities. And, I'm, as we record this, I'm in the midst of a neuroscience course at Wharton. And again,
Really?
I'm online. We're doing it, and it's about how our brain works and learning about all the myths and everything that we grew up with. And so we're probably somewhat peers, but anybody who's probably over 40 years old grew up with certain things of, this is the way we manage people. This is what people want from work. This is how we live. And we made assumptions of, going back to something simple like left brain, right brain. Everybody says, well, I'm a right brain and nobody understands me because I'm creative, or I'm left brain and I'm a logical type. And our brain doesn't work that way. We have a whole brain and they're connected, and there is no left brain and right brain. It's how the networks, how they communicate with each other. So I'm studying the shattering the myths, but long way around there. When I come back, what the book's about is people are struggling. People are absolutely struggling with it. So I started to talk about, and people are lonely. We have the highest rate of loneliness we've ever had. We have mental health issues. People are struggling at work. People are disengaged at work. They're not thriving. And this was my opportunity. Normally I write business stuff, if you couldn't tell from my messaging. I work with lawyers. This was my chance to sort of tell my story. How do you have a millennial trapped in a baby boomer body? How do you continue to have that attitude that you always have an opportunity to grow? And what changed it? So one of the, people talk about purpose, finding your purpose. And some people figured it out. Some people, and I do love what I'm doing. I had a prior career, which people read about in the book. I'll give that much away. My first 20 years of my adult career, I was a dentist. I had a great practice, a lucrative practice, had a great lifestyle, everything anybody could imagine as the American dream. And I dreaded the weekends because it meant that I had to start the cycle over again. I
Oh,
wasn't depressed. I mean, I was playing golf 5, 6 times a week, and I found ways to distract myself. But when people would say something as simple as, "Well, what's your purpose? What do you want at the end of life? What do you want on your tombstone? What do you want people to remember you by?" And you always say, "I want to be a good dad. I want to be a good spouse. I want to be good to the community. I want to be thought of as a good leader. I want to have affected other people." And I did that when I was in dentistry. I did it. I still do it now, but I did it. I had all those things, but they didn't give me juice. I mean, they didn't energize me. I was doing them, but I, I sort of was like any direction got me there.
oh, I
And,
see.
uh, and I've studied that, and I created another business around helping people, but still couldn't define it for me. What did I want at the end of the day? And about a year and a half ago, I was introduced to a program, and many people might be familiar with it. And it was started, with Simon Sinek, the Golden Circle, the
Mhm.
why, how, and what. And I tried that. I read his books, it was like I worked with people, and I would try to go through all those exercises, and I couldn't come up with it. And I was introduced to a program from an organization called the Why Institute, which I'm affiliated with now. And it in 8 minutes, and and some people do it in 5, so it doesn't take very long. In 8 minutes, I was able to define what my why, how, and what was. And it's basically to help other people find a better way to live an extraordinary life. And it was like, it took me 40, 50 years to get that out, and in 5 to 10 minutes. So the opportunity to write a chapter about my change, how I can help people basically find a meaningful life, find their purpose, get on a different path, find happiness, find brilliance, be extraordinary, be the best they can be, whatever term you want to use. To be able to do that, or at least get that path started quickly, was what I decided to write about. So just the convergence of ideas and timing and opportunity, and there I was.
Yeah. And that's really awesome, Ira, because when you're talking about people not finding their path, there's so many of us. And even I was lost for a while. And I heard this saying, and at the time I didn't really know what it meant, but it said, live your dash. And I'm like, live my dash. And, I'm sure you've heard that you're born on a certain date, you die on a certain date, and that dash is in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
are you living? Are you really living? Are you living your purpose? Are you doing what you love? What is it you really deeply desire to do? And that one little quote changed my whole life, because I really wasn't. I wasn't living
Yeah.
my dash. I was
I actually,
existing.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no, the dad, I didn't hear that. I heard it in different ways, but
Okay.
or I heard it and forgot it, and forgive me, I still have a little bit of baby boomer brain.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. It's like I walk into the kitchen a lot more and not know why I'm walking into the kitchen.
Well, don't feel bad. I'm right with you.
But yeah, no, that's absolutely the truth. And people go, we grew up in a generation as a baby boomers, as living to work. That was the goal. We associated with the job title. That's what we were. And again, I was even before millennials, I was probably more of that mindset, because yeah, I was a dentist, and I had the title, and putting doctor in front of you gets you into places, and sometimes gets you better seats and better tables and whatever. But I didn't always use it. And when I left, people said, well, you earned it. You spent all that time, you earned that degree. Why don't you put that out there? And because that didn't identify me, that wasn't who I was, my job title. And when you ask people, just ask people what they do. And instead of saying, I help other people find a better way to live an extraordinary life, what they say is, oh, I'm a dentist. Oh, I'm a real estate agent. Oh, I'm a broker. I'm an engineer. I'm an accountant. And it's like, oh, okay, that's nice. Oh, yeah, that's a really good job.
Yeah.
Conversation. And I'm not talking about what I have as a tagline. It could be. And it's not some catchy networking phrase that you can go out and do, which people say, oh, yeah, you need one of those. No, it's really what I do. And when I read those words from going through this what they call Y operating system, when I read those words, I go, yeah, this defines me. And my previous business was employee assessments. So there's hundreds of assessments, DISC and Myers-Briggs and Colby and
Right.
and Enneagrams and writing analysis. I mean, there's a million different ways to assess personality. I know them all. And I created a few and worked with businesses and help get people on the right track and hire the right people and help them identify who fits in the culture and what are they good at, what are their strengths and weaknesses. I mean, I did that. Yet but I still couldn't figure out my why.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out the simple why, how, and what, and until I saw it on paper, and it was like, again, things just converged, and it's like I've got to share this idea. I got to tell the story. People were really struggling, and they are. I mean, again, the rates of loneliness, of employee health, employee illness or mental illness. But just mental unwell being. I don't know if that's a word, but
It is
people,
now.
yeah,
We'll write it down and use it.
people are just searching,
Yeah.
for
They are.
something, and to have the opportunity to put that together. And I've written this will be I've had another co-authored book and then 6 books from scratch that I wrote from beginning to end, and they're hard. I mean, I admire people who say, oh yeah, I took a 3-hour airplane and I wrote a book or an airplane ride and I wrote a book. I never could do that. I can write an article, but I couldn't put the book together. So even, the 3,500 words, approximately 3,500 words to write the chapter, but this came together pretty quickly. And that's what it can be. I mean, it's not like, oh, you have to take 40 years to figure out what your life is. No, you can do it quickly. So hopefully we can reach a few, teens and 20 and 30-year-olds. But even
My
if
my daughters are going on 21 and 29, and they're just sometimes they're a little bit lost.
it's hard for them now. I mean,
It is.
It's the good thing is they don't have all the trash that we do.
Yeah.
They don't have, that's the other thing is going back to normal. Well, what was normal for them? I mean, normal for them the last 10 years has been pretty disruptive. So,
Right.
or 15 years, especially if they're, or that, I mean, they were pretty young at that point, but a real estate, the housing bust, and then the recovery, and then, between the politics, the disruptions, the wars, there's been a whole lot of, and then a pandemic that is normal to them. Their world is never normal, and now they're faced. 20 young people are faced with: do I go to college? Do I not go to college? Do I assume $200,000 of debt? Am I going to get it written off? Am I not going to get it written off? What type of jobs are going to be available? And then you throw on top of that, it's like, okay, we're sort of getting back to normal. The economy's settling down. We have low unemployment. The inflation is coming down. And then you say, oh, let's introduce ChatGPT. Let's introduce AI that's going to wipe out all the jobs that you just spent $200,000 to go to school for and assume debt. And the job that you thought you were going to get is no longer available.
Isn't that scary? That really is when you think about that. These kids coming out, like you said, with $200,000 in debt. How do they ever pay that off if they're student loans?
And for some of them, I mean, I forget, they said one school is now $84,000 a year. and it might have been Harvard because of the lawsuit
Yeah.
that came out and everything. Um, and and a lot of that is aid, and they got a $500 million or $500 billion in endowment. So they certainly are able to support students. But yeah, I mean it's an absolutely crazy time. And although I certainly believe that people need to continue your education, be educated, continuous education, just constantly learning, unlearning, relearning, or de-skilling up. I heard it was actually upskilling and reskilling were the big words in our universe. And that includes going to college or other things. But once you go to college, it's not over. So adults such as me, and I'm not the oldest one in my class, by the way. So it's interesting. They got 50 people from 22 countries. Sounds like the book, 30 countries.
Yeah, really.
But yeah, 22 countries around the world of all different walks of life. And there's I assumed I was the oldest, as I usually do, and I wasn't. And so yeah, there's somebody almost 80 years old.
I think that's wonderful, because if you would have asked me 20 years ago if I would be doing something like that, something like I'm doing right now, it'd be like, no, I'm not getting on a computer. I'm not talking to someone in Pennsylvania. And then you kind of realize that you have to flow with everything and keep upgrading yourself, just like you would your phone or your computer. Your body, your mind, your soul, everything needs to be upgraded right along with all this. So, and I'm curious, with this class you're taking, have you learned, or does it talk about anything about why people are so fearful to change?
Somewhat. But it's about marketing. And that's their bent. That's where most of the research is applied in business, is marketing. But it could be applied from not only selling, toothpaste and hot dogs, and cars and clothes, but it also relates to how organizations going to be hired and how people choose jobs. So in a sense, it talks about brand loyalty, how people make the choices, how do we develop connections. Certainly there's a huge debate over remote work versus return to the office. And controversy of do you need to be in person? Do I need to be sitting next to you in person to have a relationship, to feel connected, to be in the flow,
Right.
to have those serendipitous moments? And I can tell you throughout this conversation, because we connected, from our first message, we just connected somehow. We've had a couple serendipitous moments that it's like, the light bulbs are going on. It's pops. So you can do it, but how do you do it? And people will say, no, I just can't do it through a two-dimensional screen. I'm uncomfortable being on screen. I don't like the way I look. I don't like the way I sound. And they go through all these excuses of why they can't do it. And therefore I need to go back and stand 3 feet from you to have a conversation. And some of us learned how to do it. Some of us don't. There are times that being in person has its advantages. And I 100% agree. But there's got to be a reason to do that. There's got to be a reason for me to drive 2 hours to a meeting, to sit next to somebody, and then be on our phones looking stuff up. Or the third person is, I drive to Philly, which has happened, for a 2-hour meeting, and the third person couldn't make it because either of childcare or too much traffic, or they got delayed, or they didn't feel well, and we're on the screen with them.
Yeah.
I don't need to do that. I mean, I don't need to take 4 hours of my life, 2 hours down, 2 hours back, and sit in a meeting with somebody else on a screen on through a device. So, but as technology, if you think back, by the way, I don't want to forget this part. I'm skipping around a little bit. You said something about it's terrifying, how terrifying it is with all these changes, especially for young people. And in one of my other descriptions is I'm also fascinated and terrified by VUCA, going back to that volatile, uncertain, complexity, ambiguous. It absolutely is absolutely terrifying. I mean, I can wake up and go, do I really want to, how long do I want to live? And, but then immediately I go into somebody will talk about something you can do now, and it's like, oh yeah, let's do that. Let's hop on another call like this, and meet somebody new from around the world, or in another state, or talk about things. So it's fascinating and terrifying, and that's the paradox. I mean, we're going to have to learn, how to live with that. But as we start to move forward, as we start to look at where we're headed with all these things, we need to to learn. We need to learn and unlearn, and that's what I'm doing now. I talk about the AQ is about adaptability quotient. One of the things I learned about what do we need to do to be more adaptable is one of the 5 skills. We need grit. Certainly need to be gritty. We persevere, and we need to be resilient, and we need to have a growth mindset, which is is that we're all on a journey, and we need to learn how to make mistakes. We need to have mental flexibility. We need to be able to balance, decipher misinformation from information, and have an open mind. But we need to unlearn. And I never heard that term. It's really relatively new. We need to rewire our brain. And we've all heard, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
I dispute that. I dispute that.
No, absolutely. But nobody had proof. It's like, oh, well, you're different. You're the exception. And then, with neuroscience, going back to the neuroscience, what neuroscience showed us was that our brains are like plastic. I mean, it's neuroplasticity. They can be rewired. Yes, it takes training and it takes habits, and you have to practice over and over and over again. We didn't build the habits that we have overnight. They became habits because we did them every day, multiple times a day. Or didn't do them multiple times a day, and that became the habit. Eating badly or eating good are 2 different habits, and we found we can rewire our brain to do that. So when they talked about the neuromarketing, what are some of the trends? I had to do a lot of unlearning, because I immediately came up with, and I just started a newsletter series on this. It fits in line with what we're talking about, because I called it the Extraordinary Newsletter.
I like that.
And I created a series, The Brain's Guide for Bosses.
Interesting.
I'm sorry, the Brain's Guide for Bossing. And I started with, here's 5 myths. There's no left brain, and this came from the course. There's no left brain, right brain. The myth about using 10% of our we only use 10% of our brain, so we should be using 50% is a myth. We use 100% of our brain. We just sometimes don't use it wisely, and it takes a lot of energy. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. So there's all these myths that we learned not only to manage at work, but to manage our kids, to parent. There was all these things. Oh, he's so creative. There's a light brain. They should go to art school, or, their left brain, they need to be an accountant and an engineer. And we did the best we could, but it was really a disservice. So there's a million things I can talk about, but it's only a 6 weeks certification course. So it's pretty crammed. But we've got Dr. Platt is the leader of it. And, but it's amazing listening to people, and 50 different people in 22 countries in all walks of life, all different generations. There's young and there's old, and some this is the first college course they've taken since they went to college, and other people have multiple degrees. So it was very interesting, and it was really delivered for people that weren't neuroscientists. As they said, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to do it. Well, you don't have to be a brain surgeon. You don't have to be a neuroscientist or a data engineer to learn how to apply this. So it is absolutely fascinating. That's the world. I mean, people say, well, I don't get this neuroscience thing. You wearing a Fitbit? You wearing an Apple Watch? You checking your heart rate? Checking your steps? You're checking your pulse? Yeah, you're not only using AI and technology, but well, those principles came from neuroscience, and they're collecting the data to help us have a better physical and mental quality and emotional quality of life. And I took a different angle with that, as far as, going back to the book, as looking at purpose. Our heart rates are better. We have better variability rate. Our blood pressure goes down. Our stress levels go down when we fill in that dash. When we can fill in the dash, that's what it was. And that's what my chapter is. And I can't wait to read yours and everybody else's, because it's amazing how many people had similar but different stories. That the outcomes are the same, and to have 20 different authors sharing their life story. If you don't like mine and you don't believe that fits, then there's somebody else in there that it does, and then you can go back and read the other 18 the 18 volumes.
Yeah, exactly. It's really an amazing idea that Jim and Jim put together. And just the few, I obviously haven't gone through 400 authors yet, but man, I've met some incredible people along the way already. And I've just dipped my toes in, so I'm really excited to read all these chapters. But I do have one question for you before we get off. How would you explain the Change book series to someone if they were curious about whether they should do it or not? What would you say to them?
Oh, what a great question. So we were just talking about this the other day, and I don't know if this is the best response, but it's my response. Somebody asked me a question, because I posted this in LinkedIn, and they said, what's the difference between self-awareness and self-empowerment? And this book's about self-empowerment. And I never really thought about it before as why would you read this book, or what's different about those? Well, most people are familiar with self-awareness, and whether you use Myers-Briggs or DISC, or just talk to somebody, or read self-help books, or you were just a reflective type, you just had that innate ability. It's about being aware of who you are, how I respond to the environment, how do I handle being stressed or not stressed, or there's certain people in our lives that trigger us, and how do we deal with that, and then how do we help control that? So self-awareness was about how we deal with our mental and emotional state. But it didn't mean we took action on it. Self-awareness was, I know how I respond, and I know what to do. But in order to make that change, in order to do what you need to do to, change your job, change your career, get out of a marriage, get into a marriage, whatever it is, that makes you happy. Self-awareness does not make you happy. It's a tool on the pathway. And there's a billion, I don't know if there's a billion, but probably close to that, billion self-help books out there that all talk about how to get in touch with yourself. But there's not that many good ones. There's a lot, but there's not that many good ones that actually give you the steps to get there. Or they're expensive, or they're selling expensive services and things. So this book's about self-empowerment. This book is about what do you need to do to take that step? What do you need to do to get where you need to be in order to be happy? This isn't about getting another job. This isn't about getting into a partnership or getting out of a partnership. This isn't about which course, what should I take in school? This is about, what are the steps I need to be happy and find meaning in life? And that's self-empowerment. So this is not just another self-awareness, self-help book. This is about self-empowerment, giving you the tools to make the change that you need to change. And in my terms, to be brilliant and extraordinary.
Oh, I love ending like this. What a great way to describe that. And Ira, you are fascinating. I could listen to you all day. I love our conversations that we have, but unfortunately we're at the end. But thank you so much for being here today. I love hearing your perspectives. I love your intelligence. I love the way you speak about it. And I love the fact that I think we're both millennials stuck in baby boomer bodies. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to use that. But
we got a growing club.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for being here. I've loved our conversation, and I know we're going to talk soon. Okay.
A pleasure. Thanks. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Nicole Harvick, and this is my co-host,
Rachel Best. And we look forward to seeing you again next time.